To say this road test has caused me mild excitement would be a massive understatement. Ever since I was a child, I've been fascinated by the Talbot Matra Rancho. I bought this especially for this test, but I did actually used to own one of these excellent models of the Talbot Matra Rancho, and today I'm so very excited. I've never been near one of these, and today I'm going to be putting this one through its paces. So I guess I better explain a bit about what it is and how on earth it came to be. So this is a Talbot Matra Rancho, but the origins of the car are actually Simca. The Simca 1100 launched in 1967, an amazing car, a technical tour de force. It had a transverse engine with an end-on gearbox and a hatchback, perhaps because Simca enjoyed a very close relationship with Fiat, and through Auto Bianchi, Fiat gave us the first transverse engine with end-on gearbox in a hatchbacks in the form of the Auto Bianchi Primula, and Simca picked up that ball and ran with it and developed this fascinating little hatchback. So you can think of the Matra Rancho as effectively just a big plastic glass fibre body stuck on the Simca 1100 platform. This is actually on the pickup chassis. It's got the same wheelbase as the pickup, but an extension piece after the rear axle, just to create plenty of load space. It's a fascinating concept. Matra existed as a producer of sports cars. Matra was a huge industrial conglomerate in France, but bought the Jet sports car, then developed its own range of sports cars, and the Bagheera and the Morena developed during the 1970s, but realised, like many, sports cars not the route to fast profit. What they needed was something that would have wider appeal and sell in greater numbers, and it certainly did. The Matra Rancho sold, I think, 57,000 units, which to Matra was just an immense amount. So a very successful concept, but lots of lovely little details everywhere that I think you will like very much. You got this stepped roof, which is so reminiscent of the Land Rover Discovery. But this was years ahead. It came out in 1977, and you got details like these spotlights on the front, which don't work with the ignition because you can turn them around all over the place. So not very road legal. So they are forbidden for road use, but it's all part of the butch look. This one has had a few modifications. It's got a genuine front bumper and winch. That was an optional extra back in the day, not in the UK, but the French one you can have all manner of things, and it's even got a locking or a limited slip front diff, one of the many failed attempts to try and make it a proper off-road vehicle. But much like today, this is not really an off-road vehicle. It's not really why people were buying them. That people bought into the funky look. They bought into the massive interior space. And really, this is soft roading decades before today's SUVs. Matra was way ahead of the game. Too far ahead, some could say. So let's take a further look at some of the practicalities of this car. As you can see, there are 2 seats in the boot here. And the head restraints are a little low for me. Obviously these are child seats, but it is a double-sided head restraint. So there's a head restraint for the person sitting in the rear seat as well. And so much glass, it's yeah, a very good view out. Got windows absolutely everywhere. If you decide this is not for you, and the family wagon is not what you need, then excuse the vinyl noises. We can flip that over, we can release this. Voila, we have a flat-ish floor. I'll just bring you back a bit more to see. And the 7-seat version, I believe, was standard in the UK, but in France it was optional, so you could have a bit extra space. But the rear seat itself, just like on my little model, look at this, this is one of the things I loved. My little model, I don't know if you can see in, but the rear seat you can raise and lower with this little switch on the bottom. You don't do it like that on this. It's a fair bit easier, I think. but it's a 50-50 split seat, so it folds down. This is just a bar held in place by a big spring, so you can take the head restraints out, and you've got a cavernous amount of space. It is said that the designer, they designed it so a double bed will fit in the back, and the designer sat up in the bed and banged his head, so I thought, oh, we'll just put a bit more height on it. Whether that's true, I don't know. It could just be one of those amazing automotive tales. But yeah, it's a practical family car. And just like the Range Rover, we got the split tailgate, and then this glass hatch comes down. And I will just say, this is a right-hand drive specific rear wiper. They actually made a completely different panel and had a different bend on the wiper for left-hand drive, which is amusing because the Simca 1100 itself, on which this is based, always had left-hand drive wipers, no matter which side the steering wheel was fitted. So Matra tried to correct it with the rear wiper. That is a boring fact you didn't need to know. Another boring fact you don't need to know is that this extra height roof over the cab is fake. The headliner of the car is considerably lower than this is. It's all for looks. But one thing I love is all this plastic cladding and everything, something which we're familiar with cross versions of various cars today, makes it look so very different from the humble Simca 1100 on which it's based. So under the bonnet here, we find the only engine choice for your Talbot Matra Rancho. It's the Poisi engine from Simca, not the 1100 thankfully. They inserted the 1442cc version, which I believe some Spanish and Scandinavian market 1100s had, but it was more familiar in the Talbot Alpine, of course. And it's an engine that had a very, very long life. It lived on into the 1990s in the Peugeot 309, which was another cast-off Talbot stroke Simca design, and not massively powerful, but good enough to get one of these up to about 90 miles an hour. I got a little carburetor under here, everything very, very accessible. A chain driven camshaft, I believe, because the camshaft is nice down low in the engine. So yeah, nice and easy to work on. On this end is the gearbox, 4-speed unit, and like I say, this has the limited slip diff that was available in France as a special option. I believe it was fitted to the Grand Raid, which tried to be more of an off-road version, had chunkier tyres available. Moving inside, a big opening door of the 3-door or commercial version. I've got a lovely little cargo net in the door there, and we hop in behind a familiar sort of Simca-esque steering wheel and column stalks. We've got indicators left. The indicators seem to work even with the ignition off. Light control there, and I think that's your main beam. I don't know if there's a flasher, possibly. And we've got wipers over this side. We'll obviously get to wipers shortly. Switchgear just chucked around with seemingly gay abandon. We've got a 6-binnacle instrument panel here, although I should point out this is an aftermarket, well, not aftermarket, this is from a left-hand drive one that's been modified to fit. And unfortunately the rev counter is broken because the needle is considerably bent. That happens. But we've got switchgear randomly, hazard lights here. Oh yeah, that sounds like it's got the same indicator relay as my 2CV. And that one is for testing the brake lights, the brake warning light rather. So this button here, you press it and that light comes on up there. And if that light comes on without pressing that button, it means your brake fluid is probably at a perilously low level. We've got a heated rear window, and I believe that's rear fog light over there. We've got an extra bit of switchgear over here, but I think the owner has added themselves. Excuse me, focus. For I think the front spotlights. I have no idea what that one's for. And similarly, I've no idea what's going on with these two down here either. The owner has just fitted a few extras, like this little digital voltmeter, probably also a USB outlet. We won't meddle too far. Ventilation a little lacking. We've got 2 vents and that's it, and given all the glass, seems a little perilous. Glove box is actually up here. There we go, it's quite deep, so you can get stuff in there, and there's a little shelf under here, ideal place to hide your fire extinguisher. You know, these seats are lovely, really, really big and comfortable, but the handbrake's there. I can't actually get my hand easily onto the handbrake. That's not the best bit of design ever. All right, let's see how difficult it is to get into the back. Make sure I'm not presenting bum cleavage. Tip the seat, and in I go. Pull the seat back, and yeah, this is really comfortable. Very airy and light. Obviously, massive amounts of headroom. That is a ridiculous amount, and these nice big sliding windows mean at least you can get plenty of ventilation. I've even got a little ashtray down there and a grab handle there for when we're roughing it off-road. The rear seat is actually higher up as well, deliberately, so I can kind of see over the driver and get a good view of the view ahead. That's actually really good. There is a grand raid demonstrating its winch. You actually could get an optional winch, and also the anti-bog, which consisted of your limited slip diff and perhaps some slightly more aggressive tyres. There is the differential. So this is in the excellent book Rancho, La Rancho de Mon Père, my dad's rancho, effectively. It's a lovely book, well worth checking out. Right, let's get this thing started up. And there you go, it's not the clattery rattle you might expect. Oh, there we go. So yeah, you can immediately see the downsides of a left-hand drive wiper pattern on a right-hand drive car. These blades are a little smeary. I don't think this car goes out in the rain. Oh, very much. Yeah, we've got a big corner of sheer ignorance over here. We've got a triangle of doom as well, building up a bit of disappointment. But even on the passenger side, the wiping is a little imperfect, although I don't think that's a standard Matra or Simca wiper arm, to be fair. So it's okay, but not exactly breathtaking. Okay, here we go then in the Matra Rancho. So the engine, as I remember from my Peugeot 309, the Poissy engine is not really a masterpiece for the ears. It's a bit rough, a bit raucous, but thankfully, I guess because it's so far away, it's fairly quiet here. Okay, the Essex Scouts are livening things up for us by walking on both sides of the road. Well done, folks. I must be a bit confused. Must be difficult for them being so far from Essex. But you worry you'd feel the weight of all that fiberglass back there, but not a bit of it. It feels actually very balanced. Although, you know, if you overload the boot, I bet it does make the steering quite light, which would actually be a blessing. I know the owner has pumped the tyres up a bit beyond their normal level, purely because the steering was always criticised for being a bit heavy in these cars. And it is, at manoeuvring speeds, you really do feel it. Maybe made a little worse by the aftermarket wheels on this, but I doubt it, because he's actually fitted the correct Pirelli Cinturato tyres that these would have had new. They didn't come with mini lights though, that's an owner addition. But overall, the vibe is, apart from the annoying squeak, which seems to have got worse since I stopped to film, it's actually a really pleasant place to be. What is that? It's not the glove box lid, is it? No. No. Oh, maybe that has stopped it. Genius. No. No. So like I say, they managed to sell 57,000 of these. They sold about 6,000 of them in the UK. And that's despite, here in the UK, a surprisingly high list price. These were priced slightly above or around the same as a CX Familial, the enormous estate with hydro pneumatic suspension, or the iconic Volvo 245, very capacious wagon itself. So they were priced high. And like I say, much has been made over the years about the fact, oh, but it hasn't got four-wheel drive and it should be such an adventure vehicle. But even though the brochures promised adventure, who was really using their Matra Rancho to do anything other than take the kids to school? I'm afraid we're limited to 40 miles an hour on these roads. We will go and find some quicker ones. But yeah, overall, the vibe is, it's got that typical, really composed French ride. It's torsion bars all round, longitudinals at the front, they're transverse at the rear. But ultimately, the Matra Rancho went out of production for a couple of reasons. One is Simca stopped making the pickups in 1985. The saloons had finished earlier than that, 81, 82, I think. But the commercials did linger on a little longer. The other reason was Matra was by then building the Renault Espace, which had started as a slow seller, but had really gained momentum, and ultimately I guess the Espace was the replacement for the Talbot Matra Rancho. The history of Simca is quite a complicated one itself. Obviously, when the 1100 that this is based on was being developed, Simca very much in bed with Fiat. I think Fiat owned a good chunk of the company, and staff would move between the two companies, which is how they got access to that transverse end-on gearbox layout used in the Auto Bianchi Primula and later the Fiat 128. But by the time this car was built in about 1983, things had changed quite a lot. Chrysler Europe had bought Simca just before the 1100 came out, but by the late 70s Chrysler was regretting its European purchases and sold its operations in Europe to Peugeot for £1, a symbolic amount, but of course it meant Peugeot inherited an awful lot of debt. And Matra had developed the Espace originally on Simca running gear, but Peugeot was unimpressed, and as it was looking to save money, taking a gamble on a one-box design wasn't what it wanted to do. So Matra approached Renault, then Peugeot thought, this isn't really what we want. So Matra then ended up working with Renault and dropped the previous Simca or Talbot engined or engineered models. So how this became a Talbot Matra Rancho is that with Chrysler pulling out, everything was sold to Peugeot, and Peugeot revived the Talbot brand, which was part of the British Roots empire by then. Sorry, I'm just noticing we're cruising along very nicely at 50 miles an hour. Apart from that incessant squeak, it's feeling very, very pleasant in here. There's not too much noise, even with the window open for a bit of ventilation. This is a very pleasant car, and this was always going to be the issue, but yeah, I like this car rather a lot. I thought I would, and I really do. It's a shame there are so few left. There are currently only 2 of these registered in the UK. Oh my gosh, I would have loved one of these. Unfortunately, rust was a big issue. Where they screwed these lamps into the scuttle, that didn't help. That caused rot spots. But what made things difficult is that fiberglass rear body is bonded to the steel substructure of the pickup, which means dealing with rust repairs gets very, very involved. Same issue that happened with the early Lotus Europa, where the body was bonded to the chassis, and it just makes restoration an absolute nightmare. And unfortunately, rust was definitely a problem. So many cars from the 70s just rusted almost before your eyes, and that's why there are very few survivors today. In France, you could have a range, different versions. There was even a van version with no rear seat. The French love an estate turned into an enterprise version. But here in the UK, you got one model, and this was it. You got 7 seats and the spotlights, and that was about it. Like I say, this one has been tweaked a little by the current owner, and I love that. It kind of feels like his car. That's really nice. But yeah, it's a great bit of kit, and it's a shame more of them don't survive. And that's us at the UK limit. There's a fair bit of tyre noise. I don't think the road surface is helping. Not very much wind noise at all. Or maybe the howl is the wind hitting these spotlights. But the engine sounds perfectly happy to do this sort of speed. Yeah, it's just a lovely car to drive. Handles really nicely. You almost don't think about the handling. That's the biggest credit you can give it. It just feels secure and comfortable. Lovely. Oh wow, have I waited a long time to make this test drive happen. Since a fascinated child, I finally get my hands on a Talbot Matra Rancho, and it did not disappoint. It drove as well as I hoped it did. It's a slightly odd one, feels a little elderly in places, but oh yeah, chuffed a bit. So thank you for watching. See you in a future video. Bye. These don't usually flash. And because I'm in the New Forest, you sometimes have to stop for horses. Oh, they are checking both ways, to be fair. Brilliant. There we go. Live horses as they happen.